Under a relentless drizzle in the dead of night, the old cemetery in Black Hollow, Missouri, stood cloaked in an eerie silence, broken only by the mournful hiss of rain and distant thunder. Two shadowy figures, Caleb and Mason, crept through. The mud-slicked paths, their shovels glinting faintly under fleeting lightning. Driven by a dark secret from a distant land, they sought a forbidden prize buried in a freshly dug grave, a prize that promised riches but whispered of a curse. That night, a persistent drizzle fell, not heavy but unyielding, hissing through the air with a mournful cadence, accompanied by gusts of wind that sliced through the darkness like whispers from the grave. The dirt path winding through the old cemetery in Black Hollow, Missouri, saw little traffic even in daylight, let alone past midnight on a stormy night like this. The desolate scene was cloaked in gloom, broken only by the croaking of frogs and the occasional rumble of thunder, as if the heavens themselves were uneasy. The air carried a bone-chilling dampness, and faint lightning cast fleeting shadows across rows of weathered tombstones, their shapes looming like silent specters. Two figures trudged through the mud, side by side, their steps deliberate yet cautious. They were Caleb and Mason, both clad in dark jackets, hoods pulled low, hands gripping iron shovels, and canvas bags slung over their shoulders. Mason held a flashlight, flicking it on intermittently to scan the rain-slicked path, its beam cutting. Through the mist, Caleb, growing irritated, muttered a curse under his breath and snatched the flashlight, stuffing it into Mason's bag. "Keep that damn thing off," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the rain's patter. "You want someone to see us?" Caleb's caution was warranted. At this hour, the cemetery was a forsaken place, its rows of graves, some new, some crumbling, standing exposed under the storm's assault. Yet the possibility lingered that someone, perhaps a vagrant seeking shelter or a sleepless mourner, might be lurking among the headstones, catching sight of two men creeping through a graveyard in the dead of night. Mason, shivering in the cold, suggested pausing to light a cigarette under a tree, but Caleb shot him down with a glare. "No stops, no lights. You know what's at stake." Earlier that day, before they set out, Caleb had drilled the plan into Mason's head over a ritual of roasted chicken laid out on an old wooden table, a makeshift altar where they burned incense and muttered prayers to ancient forces. They had left at the stroke of midnight, under the cover of the witching hour, when the veil between worlds was thinnest. Caleb had returned from Haiti 2 years prior, a land steeped in whispers of voodoo and dark magic. In Port-au-Prince, he had apprenticed under a boker named Jean-Luc, a figure shrouded in legend, said to wield powers that could bend the will of the living and commune with the dead. For 3 years, Caleb lived in a cramped shack, learning the secrets of charms and hypnosis. Haiti, with its influx of American expatriates and opportunists, had become a shadow of its former self, a place where the old ways thrived in the underbelly of society. Caleb was one of many who crossed the sea to chase forbidden knowledge, but unlike most, he returned with a purpose. Among Jean-Luc's teachings was a grisly secret: the hand of a person struck dead by lightning, when properly enchanted, could serve as a talisman for thieves. The boker swore that such a charm would paralyze any homeowner, awake or asleep, rendering them powerless as their possessions were plundered. Caleb, back in his hometown near Route 66 in Missouri's Ozarks, had bided his time, living off the generosity of his girlfriend, Lila, while waiting for the right moment to apply his dark craft. He dreamed of wealth, of leaving Lila, returning to Haiti to honor his master, and then settling in Chicago with a new identity. For nearly 2 years, Caleb lived aimlessly, his expenses covered by Lila, a woman he charmed after his return. Yet he remained certain his day would come, convinced that the voodoo secrets Jean-Luc had imparted would build him a fortune. Until that day, he relied on Lila's money to scrape by, Then, just days ago, news swept through Black Hollow. Martha Hayes, a local farmer in Caleb's township, had been struck by lightning while taking shelter under an oak tree during a storm. Her charred body was found in a field, a rare and grim event that set tongues wagging. To the townsfolk, it was an ominous sign, a divine judgment. Black Hollow had never seen such a death, its horror too profound. But Caleb was elated. He'd known Martha vaguely, or rather her husband, Tom, who died years earlier in a car crash on the road to St. Louis. Since then, Martha's family had fallen on hard times, scraping by on a small plot of land. Her death meant little to most, but to Caleb, it was a golden opportunity. He summoned Mason, a small-time crook with a knack for picking locks, recently released from county jail after a botched car theft outside a local theater. Mason knew Martha's family, though not closely. Caleb found him adrift, unsure of his next move, and the two hatched a plan. They attended Martha's funeral, but kept their distance, avoiding attention since they weren't close to the family. As the mourners placed the coffin beside the prepared grave, Mason hid behind a large marble tombstone, watching intently, while Caleb, more cautious, knelt at a nearby grave, lighting incense as if honoring a relative on their death anniversary. Once the burial ended and the crowd dispersed, the two plotted their return for the next night. Caleb needed to act fast, before Martha's body decomposed and before her family could build a permanent headstone with cement, bricks, and sand. Luck was on Caleb's side. The persistent drizzle and deserted cemetery made their task easier. Martha's fresh grave, tucked deep in the cemetery's corner, was a muddy mess, the rain washing away large patches of dirt. The mound was low, as the family planned to build a brick tomb soon. Caleb planted his shovel in the ground, set his bag on a neighboring grave, and urged Mason to start digging. Their shovels worked in tandem, tossing mud aside. They labored in silence, the storm's wrath growing around them. The rain fell harder, the wind howling with an almost vengeful fury. The mud clung to their shovels, but the low grave yielded quickly. After about 15 minutes, Caleb paused, whispering with grim excitement, "Hey, we hit the coffin lid." Mason, hunched over and shoveling dirt on the other side of the grave, straightened up with a sigh of relief at Caleb's words, glancing at his partner. Suddenly, through the patter of rain, the faint growl of a motorcycle engine echoed from the cemetery gate, growing louder. Their eyes widened, locking in a fleeting moment of panic before both turned toward the road beyond. The sound drew closer, and Caleb, frantic, gestured for Mason to climb out of the pit. They scrambled, crouching low, and darted to hide behind a nearby stone crypt, holding their breath in tense silence. Sure enough, a motorcycle roared past, its rider shrouded in a rain-soaked poncho, face hidden beneath a hood. The bike vanished into the night, and Mason exhaled, starting to stand, but Caleb yanked him back down, pressing a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered. "This place has one way in and no way out. That bike's coming back past us." Mason wiped his wrinkled, mud-caked hands on his jacket, reaching for a cigarette, but Caleb shook his head, glaring until Mason tucked the pack away. Even Caleb, craving a smoke himself, held firm. Just as he'd predicted, 5 minutes later, the motorcycle's engine roared again, passing by before fading into the distance. Only then did Caleb stand, a smug look crossing his face as he nodded, allowing Mason to light a cigarette before they returned to the grave. Heartbeats racing, they scraped away the last layer of mud covering the coffin. Caleb tossed his shovel onto the fresh pile, leaning forward to grab the flashlight and shine it on the cheap pine lid. Mason paused, climbing out to sit behind a tombstone, sparking his cigarette. After a few drags, he shielded the glowing ember and passed it down to Caleb, still standing in the pit beside the coffin. Mason rummaged through his bag, pulling out a crowbar and a heavy, sharp hatchet meant for splitting wood. Caleb flicked the cigarette away and barked, "Hurry up, get down here." Mason, tools in hand, jumped back into the grave beside Caleb, jamming the crowbar under the coffin lid and prying hard. The nails popped with a sharp crack, and Caleb turned away, wincing. "You got the menthol rub I told you to bring?" he asked, his voice tight. Mason dropped the crowbar, turning his face from the foul stench seeping through the coffin's cracked lid. He dug into his pocket, pulling out a small jar of Vicks VapoRub and handing it to Caleb. Caleb quickly unscrewed the cap, pouring half the jar into his palm and smearing it under his nose to mask the reek of the week-old corpse. He slapped some onto Mason's face too and snapped, "Move it. It's past 2 already." As Mason pried at the coffin lid, Caleb stood ready, clutching the hatchet. The nails screeched, clear even over the heavy rain. In a moment, the lid gave way. Caleb flicked on the flashlight, its beam revealing Martha Hayes' rigid, bloated corpse. A blinding lightning flash lit the sky, illuminating the gaunt, blackened body, and Mason flinched, heart pounding, certain for a moment that Martha's eyes had flickered open to stare at him. Thunder roared, shaking the ground, and even Caleb felt a shiver of dread, avoiding the corpse's gaze. Steeling himself, he glanced skyward and urged Mason to work faster. Taking the crowbar from Mason, he ordered coldly, "Do it, now." Mason, gripping the hatchet, hesitated. One hand or both, boss?" Caleb propped up the coffin lid. "One's enough. Hurry." Mason glanced at the body. "Why not take both? You know, just in case one doesn't work?" Caleb dismissed. No, one's plenty. Get on with it. Right hand, remember left for men, right for women." Mason bent low, rain dripping from his hood onto his face, soaking him through. He tugged Martha's stiff right arm, positioning her hand on the coffin's edge, and raised the hatchet. The blade, sharp and heavy, took 4 brutal swings to sever the hand, which flew aside, caked in mud. Caleb shoved the mutilated arm back into place and slammed the lid shut. Mason scooped up the hand, its 5 fingers stiff and claw-like, covered in dirt, and stuffed it into a plastic bag before. Clambering out of the pit, he set the bag on a nearby stone tomb and asked, "Boss, we covering this back up?" Caleb, climbing out, sneezed from the cold seeping into his bones. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, and said, "Forget it, man. Leave it. Grab the hatchet and crowbar. We're done." Mason hesitated. "Maybe cover it a little, so no one notices?" Caleb thought for a moment, then nodded. Their arms ached from the sticky mud clinging to their shovels, but they didn't dare rest. In a flash, they partially refilled the grave, gathered their tools, scanned the cemetery, and hurried back along the muddy path out of the hallowed ground. The rain pounded, the wind whispered ominously, and lightning flickered like an angry deity. Soaked to the bone, they felt a surge of grim excitement, thinking of the lightning-struck hand they'd claimed. Salted, steeped in alcohol, and dried, it would open a path to riches through thievery. Starting tomorrow, Caleb would scout the wealthier homes in Black Hollow, then the county, and eventually Springfield. A few big scores, and they'd be set. He turned toward his trailer, technically Lila's, a wooden shack left by her older sister Sarah. Years ago, Sarah had married a fisherman who worked on a state-run fleet. Layla lived with her, registered as a resident. One day, Sarah sailed off with her husband, defected to Mexico, and settled in California. Lila inherited the trailer and lived comfortably off occasional money from her sister, often entertaining local cops and officials, some staying overnight. By the 1990s, with the country's reforms, Layla, now older, had to plan for her future. She sought money from her sister in California, to start a small business at the county market, but her lack of skill led to steady losses. Her parents wrote to Sarah, urging her to stop sending money, suspecting Lila was giving it to men. From then on, whenever Lila needed cash, she had to beg her parents in Springfield. Over a year ago, Lila met Caleb by chance on a bus to St. Louis. While the bus waited at a rest stop, Caleb struck up a conversation, spinning tales of Port-au-Prince. That captivated Lila with his adventurous spirit. They grew close, and Lila let him move into her trailer, despite his lack of legal residency. By then, local authorities had loosened up. Everyone focused on making money, so folks like Caleb could slip through the cracks. Caleb and Mason reached the trailer around 3 a.m., both breathing a sigh of relief after pulling off their grim task without a hitch. The hardest part, securing the lightning-struck hand, was done. A bright future loomed. Caleb would no longer need to mooch off Lila, and Mason could abandon his petty thefts. With the hand, they could waltz into any house, take everything, and leave no one able to stop them. To avoid detection by cops or neighbors, Caleb crept in through the back door, with Mason following quietly. They washed off the mud in the creek behind the trailer, its murky water sluggish and dark. Layla slept soundly upstairs, unaware of their return. A creek ran behind the trailer, a ditch Caleb had helped dig 10 years earlier with other townsfolk. Tom Hayes, Martha's husband, had been the crew leader, older and talkative. Martha used to bring him hot meals, sometimes sharing her minced chicken with chili, which Caleb occasionally got a taste of. Staring at the creek's dark flow, Caleb shivered as the image of Martha's gaunt figure in the coffin flashed vividly in his mind. Mason's place was nearby, also facing the creek, where clumps of water hyacinth drifted lazily. The two stood on a wooden bridge, a narrow plank extending from the backyard about 6 feet over the murky creek. Both used a plastic bucket to scoop water, dousing themselves. After washing, Caleb tossed Mason an old set of his clothes and said, "Here, change into these and bring that thing out." Mason, wiping himself down, asked blankly, "Bring what, boss?" Caleb snapped softly, "What else?" "Get it, so I can clean it and soak it in liquor." Mason nodded, catching on, and darted to the kitchen, opening the soggy canvas bag to pull out the plastic sack containing Martha Hayes' severed hand. He asked Caleb, "Boss, when can we use it?" Caleb held the stubby, mangled hand under the dim porch light, turning it over with a satisfied nod. 49 days, starting today. As he spoke, Caleb's mind flashed back to his master, Jean-Luc in Port-au-Prince, who had once demonstrated the power of a lightning-struck hand after enchanting it. Caleb recalled that day. 3 or 4 of Jean-Luc's trusted disciples sat in a sealed room. The Boker chanted a spell and raised the withered hand before them. Instantly, they froze, minds alert but bodies rigid, mouths agape yet speechless. That dried hand was Jean-Luc's prized talisman, never lent to any disciple. Watching the display, Caleb had thought to himself that such a hand would make riches effortless. Now that dream had come true. Mason, standing beside him, groaned impatiently. 49 days? That's forever, boss. Caleb, with a proud smirk, explained, "Gotta enchant it right, man. You can't rush this. Before 49 days, the charm won't work. My master said some fools used it carelessly and got killed by the curse." After a brief silence, Mason asked, "You sure about this, boss? You ever try it?" Caleb sat on the creek's edge, dipping the hand into the water to scrub off the dirt and sand. "Sure as hell. My master said so, and I saw it with my own eyes. Listen, your job's just to pick the locks. Once we're inside, I flash this hand, and everyone in the house awake or asleep freezes solid. We can take whatever we want, and they'll just lie there, helpless, watching. Mason, eager, suggested, "Boss, let's hit Old Man Carver's place." That retired county official from last year? Man, he's loaded. Word is, he's got a chest full of gold. I've scoped it out. His place is easy. Climb the mango tree to the balcony. The upstairs door's always unlocked. Caleb nodded, pleased. Good. Plan it out. Pick the right score. After cleaning the dead hand, they went inside. Caleb pointed to a bamboo cot against the kitchen wall, cluttered with bottles and dishes. Have a drink and crash there. When Lila's up, I'll get some cash, and we'll hit the market for breakfast. Sleep. Caleb grabbed an old pot, placed Martha's hand inside, and packed it with salt, like preserving fish to keep it from rotting. He covered the pot and set it on the kitchen cabinet. Washing his hands again with soap, he turned off the light and tiptoed upstairs. He grabbed a plastic tarp blanket for Mason to fend off the mosquitoes, then returned to Lila. In the dim light, Lila lay on her side, facing the wall, a thin blanket draped over her waist. Caleb watched her for a moment, then went back to the kitchen. He decided the pot on the cabinet was too risky. If Lila woke early and needed it, finding a severed hand would be trouble. He flicked the light back on, ignoring Mason's groggy grumble about the glare. Before hiding it behind the firewood stack, Caleb opened the pot to check the hand one last time, then buried it deep in the pile, stacking logs over it. 49 days of drying and enchanting was a long wait, and Caleb wasn't sure how he'd keep this gruesome secret from Lila. He turned off the light and slipped into bed beside her, the old bed creaking loudly. Lila startled awake, rolling onto her back and squinting at him. "Where you been? What time is it?" Caleb slid an arm around her. "Out drinking with the boys. They wouldn't let me go." Layla repeated, "What time is it?" Yawning, Caleb mumbled, "Around 3. Go back to sleep." Layla closed her eyes, but then, struck by a thought, she opened them again, turning to him. "Wait, you said you were drinking, but you don't smell like booze." Caleb stammered, Had a headache, only drank a little." Layla grumbled, "A little, and you're out this late. You don't do nothing but drink all day." "I'm broke, not a dime left. Since you moved in, my folks cut me off. I can't even ask them for money anymore. Sold that necklace Mom gave me, too. So what's your plan now?" Caleb nodded confidently. "Don't worry, babe. We're about to hit it big. Next month, I start work, and I swear, money's gonna pour in. Spend all you want." Layla, skeptical, pressed, "Hit it big doing what? Robbing houses? Times are tough, man. Hey, why don't we go to Haiti? You know a ton of folks there, right?" Muttering, she shuffled downstairs to use the bathroom. Exhausted, Caleb slid closer to the wall, his eyes stinging, trying to sleep. Jolted upright at Lila's piercing scream from the kitchen. He'd forgotten to warn her about Mason sleeping on the cot. When Lila flicked on the light and saw a man curled up there, she screamed in terror and bolted upstairs. Caleb grabbed her shoulders, soothing. "Babe, it's just Mason. He drank too much, so I let him crash here." Layla clutched her chest, panting. "God, why didn't you tell me? Scared me half to death. Thought it was a ghost." Mason, startled by the scream, sat up, flashed a sheepish grin at Lila, and flopped back down. Lila used the bathroom then, climbed back into bed with Caleb. Exhausted in the pre-dawn hours, they said nothing more, drifting into a quiet sleep. The next afternoon, Caleb slipped back to the cemetery to check Martha's grave, staying hidden behind a large stone tomb. He watched her 2 sons shoveling dirt to fill the washed-out mound. Luckily, they blamed the rain for the disturbed grave, never suspecting Caleb and Mason's gruesome act. They didn't report it to the police, instead pooling money to buy cement, bricks, and sand to build Martha a proper tomb. complete with a black and white photo on the headstone. Time crawled. Caleb and Mason counted the days until they could start their thieving. Money was running dry, with no one left to borrow from, making them cling desperately to the promise of a lightning-struck hand. Caleb's motorcycle was sold last year, and Mason's bike was gone since his prison days. Their families needed cash, and their finances were nearly bankrupt, pinned on the hope of Martha's hand. Many nights, wandering the streets of Springfield, Mason was tempted to steal a motorcycle to sell for quick cash. Picking locks was child's play for him, especially with his ready network for fencing stolen goods. But memories of his recent prison stint, coupled with Caleb's warnings to hold out just a little longer, kept him in check. Mason tightened his belt, waiting for the day he and Caleb would set out with the lightning-struck hand. He believed that rare talisman would bring them prosperity, just as Jean-Luc had meticulously taught Caleb, for 7 weeks, once a week at tea. The witching hour, Caleb took Martha's blackened, lightning-struck hand from its hiding place, performing the enchantment ritual. He lit incense, muttered prayers, and stashed it back in an iron box, concealed in a secret spot under the kitchen. Leela remained blissfully unaware of Caleb's actions, oblivious to her partner's cruel superstition, daring to sever a dead woman's hand and keep it in her home. On the 49th day, a final momentous occasion, Mason pedaled to Caleb's trailer as instructed. Dusk was settling, and Caleb had sent Lila away on an errand to clear the house. They set up an altar, lit incense to honor the ancestors, and placed the dried, shriveled hand on it. Chanting their prayers, it was late in the year, the sky moonless and starless, with a cold breeze drifting in from the creek. As they murmured their incantations, the 3 incense sticks on the altar suddenly flared up like a torch. In the thick, swirling smoke, Mason glimpsed Martha Hayes' face, faint and ghostly, staring at him. Terrified, he rubbed his eyes, but she vanished, and the flames died down, leaving only the smoldering sticks, trailing wisps of smoke. Mason, shaken, turned to Caleb. "Boss, what the hell was that? Why'd the fire blaze up like that?" Caleb, unfazed, reassured him. "Good God, man, that's the ancestors blessing our plea. It's a good sign, nothing to fear." Trusting Caleb's knowledge of voodoo, Mason calmed down. They sat in the kitchen, tearing into the roasted chicken from the altar, washing it down with a bottle of whiskey before parting ways, planning their first heist the next night at John Carver's house, a retired county official known for his wealth. Caleb warned Mason, "Listen, tomorrow night you wait at home. No drinking, got it? One slip and we're screwed. I'll come by around 11 and we'll go. And hey, bring that bag from the cemetery and the flashlight, all right?" Mason nodded, pedaling home with a spring in his step. The next evening, a Saturday, to kill time while waiting for nightfall, Mason strolled to a diner in the county market, the cleanest joint in town and his usual haunt. He hadn't been back in months, owing the owner a hefty tab. Today, though, he felt a surge of confidence after tonight's score. He'd return tomorrow with cash to settle his debt and earn back the respect of the owner and the waitresses. Mason walked in. The owner behind the counter sighed, doubting he'd see a dime today. But knowing Mason's rough past, his time in and out of jail, they didn't dare turn him away. Mason swaggered in, ordering a deluxe Port-au-Prince noodle bowl loaded with seafood and an iced coffee with extra cream. The diner owner eyed Mason with a face cold as stone, signaling disapproval, but Mason ignored it. It was dinner time, and the place was packed with only one empty table left. Mason took a seat deep in the corner, pressed against the wall under flickering yellow lights where moths and mosquitoes buzzed, occasionally dropping to the floor. Puffing on a cigarette, Mason stared out the door, lost in thought about the crucial heist tonight. Old Man Carver, they said, had hundreds of ounces of gold stashed in a wooden chest upstairs. Tonight, Mason and Caleb would clean him out. Outside, a few beggars huddled on the porch, hands outstretched to every customer entering. They were tolerated there, but if they stepped inside, the owner chased them out to keep the patrons comfortable. A waitress brought Mason's noodle bowl and iced coffee, setting them down. With the cigarette dangling from one side of his mouth, Mason stirred the coffee vigorously, took a small sip, and sighed with satisfaction before digging into the deluxe Port-au-Prince noodle dish. Halfway through the bowl, chewing with relish, a haggard beggar woman shuffled in from the door, standing right in front of Mason, pleading in a frail voice, "Please, sir, have mercy and spare some change. I'm old, crippled, with only one hand." The woman was gaunt, her clothes caked with mud, and she held out two bony hands. Her left hand was intact, but her right was a stump, severed at the wrist, the wound still raw. Annoyed, Mason glanced toward the counter, ready to call the owner to shoo her away after all. This diner was known for keeping beggars from bothering customers, but the owner was in the kitchen. The woman persisted, repeating, "I'm old, crippled, with only one hand. Please, sir, have mercy." Mason looked up, and in an instant, he froze. His mouth gaped, eyes glazed, and the chopsticks slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. He doubled over, vomiting onto the table, noodles and pork spilling out, splattering into his bowl and coffee. The beggar woman standing before him was Martha Hayes, the same woman whose coffin he had pried open 49 days ago to hack off her right hand. Under the pale light slanting from the ceiling, her face was ashen and chillingly cold, identical to the one Mason had seen in the cemetery under a blinding flash of lightning when he desecrated her grave. He retched again, drawing the stares and grimaces of the owner and other patrons. The beggar woman turned slowly, limping out of the diner with deliberate steps. The owner rushed over, concerned, thinking Mason was ill, but Mason kept vomiting. Then staggered to his feet, stumbling out into the street, leaving his bicycle propped outside the diner. The owner stepped to the curb, watching him go, puzzled by Mason's uncharacteristic meekness. Normally, Mason bullied the waitresses to show off, and they humored him, knowing his reckless, thuggish reputation. Still, the owner let it slide. Not adding today's meal to Mason's tab, Mason hurried to Caleb's trailer, his face drained of color, mumbling like a man possessed. He recalled the previous night when he and Caleb had placed the lightning-struck hand on the altar, burning incense to mark the 49th day. The 3 incense sticks had flared up like a torch, and Martha's face had appeared faintly in the thick smoke. Mason had been uneasy then, but Caleb insisted it was a sign the hand was enchanted, that the ancestors had blessed their plea. Mason had trusted him. Now he realized Martha's spirit had appeared in the smoke to warn him. At any cost, he had to stop Caleb from going through with this, or if Caleb refused, Mason would back out to avoid the horrifying consequences that were surely coming. Mason burst into Caleb's backyard through the back gate, not bothering to greet anyone. Caleb and Lila, eating dinner in the kitchen, stared in shock as Mason appeared, his face twisted, stammering to Caleb. "Boss, oh God, boss, I just saw her." Caleb, puzzled, asked, "What? Who? Who'd you see?" Mason's bleary eyes darted toward the backyard, then up to the main room, his voice trembling with urgency. "God, it's Martha, man. She came back." Leila set down her plate, surprised, and cut in, "Martha who? Came back from where?" Then, realizing, she continued, "Oh, you mean Martha Hayes, right? The one struck by lightning? She just appeared. To you? Holy hell, why would she haunt you?" Caleb shot Mason a sharp look. "Cut it out, you're talking nonsense." Mason, shaking, grabbed Caleb's arm, pleading desperately, "Boss, I'm begging you, we gotta bury it. Take it back to..." The cemetery, give it back to her. It's no good, Nan. I'm scared out of my mind. Under Lila's bewildered gaze, Caleb stood, dragging Mason upstairs, scolding. What the hell's wrong with you? You drunk or something? Don't talk crazy in front of my girl, got it? Asterisk out in the front yard, Caleb's temper flared. You're losing it, Mason. Saying that crap in front of Lila? Now she's suspicious. Mason shook his head, nearly sobbing. Boss, the hand, where's it at? Please, take it back. Bury it. I'm begging you. This is too much. I can't do this. Caleb, cut him off. What are you yammering about? I don't get it. Panting, Mason recounted. You know the diner, Sunny Spring, right? Just now, I was eating there, and she walked in, stood right in front of me, begging for money. I thought she was some bum, was gonna shoo her off, but then I looked closer. Was her boss. God, I was terrified. She showed me her stump, the arm I cut. I puked all over the table and ran here to tell you. Listen, we gotta bury that hand, give it back to her. I'm begging you, Caleb snapped. Her grave's bricked up now. How we gonna dig it up? Mason, anguished, pressed on. Then bury it nearby, anywhere, as long as we give it back. Otherwise, she'll haunt us to death. Caleb stomped his foot, shaking his head. Theft. Your story doesn't add up. You saw her while eating at a crowded diner? Ghosts don't show up in busy places. Drop it. Mason pleaded. I'm telling the truth, man. If you don't believe me, fine. Do it alone. I'm out. I'm not touching this. With that, Mason left without a goodbye, and Caleb, fuming, watched him go before returning to Lila. Caleb wasn't discouraged. He knew Mason would come back. Mason was even broker than he was, penniless. Problem was, Caleb couldn't pull off the heist alone. He lacked Mason's lock-picking skills. But with the lightning-struck hand as his talisman, once inside a house, the job was as good as done. Mason, after leaving Caleb, staggered home like a lost soul. Halfway there, he remembered his bicycle left at the diner but didn't dare return, fearing Martha's spirit might still linger, hiding in some beggar to wait for him. At home, he went straight to the kitchen, then back out. His parents asked questions, but he didn't answer, just muttering to himself. The idea of thievery no longer held any appeal. He was consumed by the image of Martha, gaunt and ghostly, pale, a hungry specter from the other side demanding retribution. Mason sat listlessly on the porch steps, staring into the pitch-black night. The neighbors' houses across the road, shrouded by dense trees, flickered with lights like will-o'-the-wisps, haunting him in the moonless dark. He sat there for ages until his mother came out, tugging his arm to come inside. Reluctantly, he stood still in his clothes and collapsed onto his bed. But as he closed his eyes, Mason heard sharp knocks in his ears, 4 distinct taps, a pause, then 4 more, over and over. At first faint, the sound grew louder, sharper, until he bolted upright, realizing it was the echo of the 4 hatchet swings he'd made to sever Martha's hand in the cemetery. Drenched in sweat, Mason sat up, stumbling to the kitchen for water. His throat parched. The air in the house felt stifling, suffocating. He needed to get out. His mother had locked the front door, and he didn't want her to know he was awake, so he slipped into the backyard, sitting under a dim 40-watt bulb, staring at the vast, murky creek. Panting, he lit a cigarette. A few boats glided by in the night, fishermen who lived on the water or traders hauling goods, their lanterns casting faint, ghostly glows that didn't reveal faces. Mason was nearly done with his cigarette, about to head inside, when a small boat drifted close and pulled up to his bank. A girl's voice called out, "Hey, mister, can I ask for directions?" "Which way's the county market?" "I'm hauling fruit." "To sell, but I've been rowing forever and can't find it. Mason, sitting on a bench made of cut logs near a banana grove, looked up, startled. The voice was unfamiliar, not someone from the neighborhood, just a girl lost while delivering goods. From the boat's cabin, she emerged with a large storm lantern, standing at the bow waiting. Mason found it odd. Locals rarely got lost on these waterways. He stood, stepping closer, not wanting to shout and wake his family. Cigarette still in his mouth, he squinted through the smoke. The girl on the boat had a slender, graceful figure, so striking that even without seeing her face. Clearly, Mason felt a spark of excitement. As he approached the boat's bow, she repeated, "I've been lost since noon, starving. There's nothing to eat on the boat. Hey, mister, you got any instant noodles or something? Can you spare a pack?" Mason, eager, replied, "Sure thing. Hang on a sec. I'll grab some from the house." "Oh, you like cassava? My mom cooked some this afternoon, real good. Come up here, sit for a bit, I'll get it for you." The girl nodded, reaching out for balance as the small boat wobbled, threatening to tip her into the water. Mason quickly offered his hand to help her ashore. But the moment their hands touched, a fierce gust blew up from the creek, slamming into Mason and making him tremble violently. At the same instant, the lantern in her hand flared blindingly, like a gas lamp, illuminating her fully. Mason looked up, let out a piercing scream, stumbled back, released her hand, and plunged into the water. The girl before him wasn't a young woman with a clear voice. It was Martha Hayes, holding out her severed stump for him to grasp. Mason flailed in the water, gasping as the small boat drifted away, gliding silently across the creek and vanishing into the dark. Meanwhile, at Caleb's trailer, Lila, washing dishes, quizzed her husband curiously. She'd never liked Mason, always calling him that guy, despite his friendship with Caleb. What was that guy going on about this afternoon? Saying to bury something at the cemetery? Did you two kill someone, or what? Caleb let out a loud laugh to brush off her suspicion. Haha, what are you talking about? Kill someone? No way. Lila stood, wiping her hands on an old shirt, and pressed. Then what was he saying? Boss, bury it at the cemetery? Come on, tell me straight. Did you and him kill someone? Caleb forced a grin, stammering. That idiot was just drunk. Talking nonsense. And you, why are you listening to him? Kill someone? If I did, you think I'd still be sitting here? Cops would have hauled me off by now. Layla resumed washing dishes. Since meeting Caleb, she'd been drawn to his tales of mysterious voodoo from Haiti, so captivated that for 2 years, despite him bringing in no money, she patiently supported him. Murder wasn't something Caleb had ever mentioned, but he'd once told her about a spell in Port-au-Prince that made a woman's stomach swell until she couldn't eat. 49 days later, she died, and doctors, cutting her open, found a pile of broken glass inside, shocking Haiti's medical community with no explanation. That story left Lila both in awe and occasionally afraid of Caleb. Still, she despised Mason for his thieving reputation, known across Black Hollow. She didn't want Caleb tied to a convict like him, fearing it'd ruin his name. So, though Caleb's explanation made sense, she wasn't done. I don't know, but that guy looked scared out of his mind, I could tell. Something's up, and you're not telling me. I've said it before, Mason just got out of jail. Why are you hanging with him? You'll end up behind bars with him, I'm telling you. Caleb didn't know how to answer. He wasn't mad at Lila, but furious at his cowardly partner for blurting out about the lightning-struck hand in front of her. He wandered to the front yard, smoking for a while, expecting Mason to return as he'd predicted, but there was no sign of him. Caleb went back inside, glancing at Lila as she finished stacking dishes. He slipped out to the backyard, heading to Mason's place along the creek's edge, a few hundred yards away. The back path was shorter than the front road, which was twice as long, but Caleb rarely used it, as it cut through neighbors' yards where families often ate dinner by the creek for the breeze. Tonight, with no choice, he took the back way, relieved to find it late enough that no one was out at Mason's. The back door was shut tight. Caleb whistled their signal 2 or 3 times, but Mason didn't appear as usual. "Damn cowards." "Already asleep," Caleb muttered, cursing, and turned back. In his mind, he resolved to find a new partner for the heist. Black Hollow's thieving scene was no mystery to him. One wave of his hand, and plenty would follow, especially now that he held the rare lightning-struck hand. Back at the trailer, Lila had bathed and changed into pajamas, setting up the Mosquito. Met for bed. Seeing her, Caleb grabbed a towel and headed to the creek to wash off his frustration. As he splashed in the water, he looked up to see Mason hurrying toward him, soaked from head to toe. Caleb, thrilled, thought Mason had changed his mind for tonight's heist, but frowned in confusion upon closer inspection. Climbing out, wiping his face, he asked, "What the hell? How do you get drenched like that? Why not change?" Mason, exhausted, slumped onto a log by the creek. The dim porch light cast a faint glow on his ashen face. Caleb stepped closer, repeating, "What's wrong? Go change, man. Hey, take some of my clothes. Get dry." Mason, near tears, recounted, "Boss, I don't know what to do anymore. It's over. I saw her again. I'm scared to death." Caleb, irritated, snapped, "Who now? When? You're losing it." Mason, weary, replied, "I keep telling you, boss. It's Martha. Who else?" "You won't believe me. She came right to my backyard on a boat, boss. Pulled up to my place. I was so scared I fell into the creek. Thought I'd die. That's why I ran here to tell you. We gotta rethink this, boss. Let's take the hand back. To the cemetery and bury it." Caleb swore under his breath, exasperated. "Fine, go home. You done with me? Tomorrow I'll find someone else. But listen, you better not tell anyone. Got it? You blab, and I'll curse you dead." Mason tried to plead again, but Caleb shouted him down and sent him off. Mason stood, trudging along the creek back home. Caleb watched, cursing, then changed out of his wet shorts, threw on his old clothes, and went inside. As for Mason, he reached home freezing. His soaked clothes clung to him, and the night's mist made him shiver and sneeze. The back door was ajar, the house pitch black. He pushed it open, glancing nervously at the creek, chilled by the memory of the girl on the boat turning into Martha Hayes, grabbing him with her stump. In the kitchen, he flicked on the light, grabbed dry clothes from the line, and changed. The house was asleep. Mason tiptoed upstairs, slipping into bed. Unable to sleep, his stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since noon, and the half bowl of noodles at Sunny Spring had come back up when Martha's ghost appeared. He sat up, quietly left the bed, and went to the kitchen, searching for leftover rice or instant noodles. Cooking noodles meant lighting a fire, and Mason hesitated. Glancing at the dining table, he spotted a bowl of greens still covered under a mesh dome. He grabbed the pot of cold rice from the stove, set it on the table, and pulled up a chair. Mason's family was large, so they cooked with a big cast-iron stove. Lifting the pot's lid, he let out a scream and lurched back, falling onto a pile of firewood, the lid clattering aside. Though the pot was only half empty, atop the fragrant early-season white rice lay Martha Hayes' lightning-struck hand. Mason scrambled to his feet and bolted upstairs, diving into bed and pulling the blanket over his head. He'd been in and out of jail, but never had he felt such terror and regret as today. He'd tried 2 or 3 times to convince Caleb to return the hand to Martha, but Caleb refused to listen, dismissing his stories. Mason mulled it over, wondering why, For nearly 2 months, Martha's spirit hadn't appeared, only to show up now, just as they were about to start their heist. Was it because Caleb botched the enchantment, unlike what Jing Luke had taught, stirring Martha's vengeful spirit to return? Mason's heart, usually hard as stone, fearless, now begged Martha's ghost for forgiveness. At Caleb's trailer, Lila was tucked in bed, listening to country music on the radio. Caleb sat outside, smoking until his hair dried, then turned off the light and slipped in beside her. Layla reached over, switching off the radio, and said, "You went looking for that guy Mason again, didn't you? I told you, keep hanging with him, and you'll end up in jail together. If you get locked up, don't expect me to visit. I'll go back to my folks." Caleb forced a laugh. "No way I'm going to jail. Don't worry." Lila raised her voice. "How can I not worry? I'm flat broke. Haven't had money for the market in days. Debts piling up everywhere. You never bothered to make a dime." Caleb slid an arm around her shoulders, soothing, "Listen, we're about to be rich, babe. Next week, I'll pay off all your debts." With that, he pulled her close, nuzzling into her chest, but Lila giggled and pushed him back. "Hey, that tickles." In the dim light, Caleb saw her bare face, youthful and radiant without makeup. To steer her away from nagging about money, he nudged her to lie back and climbed on top, but Lila pushed him down beside her, saying sternly, "You better promise. Next week you're getting me that money." Caleb didn't answer, reaching under the bed, feeling something lumpy beneath his back, maybe a loaf of bread or a rice roll. He thought, probably Lila's purse. He grabbed it, pulling it up to check, but before he could bring it to his face, he screamed. It was Martha's lightning-struck hand, bony, shriveled, and blackened. Caleb froze, his heart seizing in terror. He'd hidden it carefully in the iron box in the kitchen. How was it here? Instinctively, as one would fling away something repulsive, Caleb hurled the hand to the floor, but the mosquito net, tucked tightly under the mat, caught it, and it landed on his feet. He recoiled, kicking frantically. That same hand, which he'd studied as his future ally, now filled him with dread, as if it had crawled from the kitchen to join him in bed. Lila, oblivious to the gruesome object in their home, remained oddly calm despite Caleb's thrashing and shouting. He kicked the net free, shoving the hand to the floor. Only then did Lila, startled, ask, "What's that? What are you kicking like that? You acting weird tonight." Caleb, curled up at the head of the bed, panting, stammered, "Turn on the light." Confused, Lila slowly climbed out, reached for the wall switch, and flicked it on, flooding the room with light. Caleb, eyes wide, crept to the foot of the bed where he'd thrown the hand. He searched every inch, but, bizarrely, it was gone. Lila, sitting on the bed's edge, stared at her husband's pale face. "What are you looking for? You have a nightmare or something?" Caleb didn't answer, his eyes darting frantically to every corner of the small room. He wasn't asleep, so it couldn't have been a dream. For the first time, he recalled Mason's words and felt a creeping sense that something unnatural had happened to his partner. No wonder Mason had begged him all afternoon to take the hand back to the cemetery and bury it for Martha. Lila pressed him 2 or 3 more times before Caleb finally crawled back into bed, exhausted, drenched in sweat. Lila repeated, "What were you looking for? Why not tell me so I can help?" Caleb stayed silent, staring wide-eyed at the mosquito net's canopy. Layla turned off the light and slid in beside him. For the first time since they'd met, she saw her husband trembling with fear, a stark contrast to his usual cocky bravado. Though the night wasn't hot, with a gentle breeze drifting in from the creek, Lila fanned him to cool his sweat. Caleb turned on his side, clutching her tightly, his hands still shaking, sensing he'd seen something terrifying and needed her comfort. Lila dropped the fan and held him close, whispering, "Sleep, honey, just sleep. I'll rub your back, okay?" Caleb closed his eyes, silent, his hand resting on Lila's shoulder, slowly sliding down her arm. Suddenly, he screamed and bolted out of the net, because as his fingers reached her wrist, he felt her arm end in a stump, missing its hand entirely. Panicked, he flicked on the light and stood gasping. The room blazed. Bright and Lila, crawling out after him, frowned. "God, what's wrong with you tonight? Screaming like that? Acting all crazy." Caleb, pale as death, stared at her arms, bewildered to see them both intact. In the dark, he was certain he'd grasped a severed arm, just like the one Mason had hacked off Martha with the hatchet. Lila, growing annoyed, grabbed his hand, sighed, and said, "Come on, back to bed. Leave the light on all night if you want." Caleb, panting, followed her to the bed and collapsed. Exhausted, he vowed to himself to take the lightning-struck hand to the cemetery with Mason tomorrow and bury it. His chants and enchantment rituals had failed. Weakly, he murmured to Lila, "Babe, I'm so scared." Layla, pitying him, rapped, her arms around him. They lay side by side, facing each other to avoid the glare of the ceiling light. She soothed, "Sleep, I'm right here. Nothing to fear, just sleep." Caleb exhaled heavily, closed his eyes, and kissed her forehead. For the first time, he realized how much he needed Lila tonight. Without her, he'd have surely passed out from terror. Outside, the wind suddenly howled, slipping through the back door's cracks. Moments later, heavy rain pounded, mixed with booming thunder and flashes of lightning that lit up the windows. Caleb shivered, chilled, and asked, "Babe, should we close the window? I'm worried the rain'll get in." Layla replied, "Leave it. It's nice and cool. This kind of rain won't last." With that, she gently rubbed his shoulder, then eased him onto his back and climbed on top, lying across him. It was the only way to calm the haunting fear in his mind. Layla leaned down, kissing him, and Caleb, touched, wrapped his arms around her neck. Suddenly, he gasped, pushing her away, because as they kissed passionately, Lila's teeth fell out, tumbling into his mouth. He opened his eyes, horrified, spitting them out. Layla lifted her head, still lying on him. Under the bright light, Caleb stared and screamed, overcome with terror and fainting dead away. The figure on his chest, kissing him moments ago, wasn't Lila, it was Martha Hayes' rigid, blackened corpse.